Donahue.
Yes, ma'am, present.
Representative Goforth. Representative Graham.
Yeah, Goforth is present in the district.
Thank you. Representative Hart.
Present in the room.
Representative Koenig.
Present in the district.
Thank you. Representative Meredith. Present live and in front. Representative Miles.
Present from the district.
Thank you. Representative Pratt.
Present in the room.
Representative Raymond. Representative Tate.
Present in my district.
Thank you. Representative Wheatley.
Here in the room.
Senator McDaniel. Representative Petrie. Representative Reed. Representative Gooch. Representative Miller.
Here in the room.
Co-Chair Blanton.
Present in the room.
Co-Chair Dossett.
Present virtually from the 9th District.
Thank you. Chair Nemus.
Present in the room. We have a quorum. I'll take a motion for the approval of the minutes, July 7th meeting. Motion. Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. The minutes are approved. First, we will have a presentation to hear from Secretary Link from the Labor Cabinet. Please identify yourself for the record and go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is Jamie Link. I am presenting from our office here in Frankfurt, working remotely due to the COVID protocols, as you mentioned. I am the Secretary of the Kentucky Labor Cabinet. Presenting with me today will be Mr. Buddy Hoskinson, the Executive Director of the Office of Unemployment Insurance. Also with me is Mr. John Pendergrass, who is the Acting Executive Director of the Career Development Office. And joining us is Ms. Morgan Eves, who is the Labor Cabinet's Legislative Liaison. We appreciate your time this morning, and we have a brief presentation that we will go through with all of us participating in that. Certainly, if any members have any questions throughout the presentation, please stop us and we will address those as needed. And then, of course, at the end of the presentation, we'll be happy to take any questions from the members then. So with that, if we could go to the next slide, Buddy Hoskinson will start us off.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow members. We appreciate the time again this morning, as the Secretary indicated. So the first thing I want to go back and touch on with you this morning is about the Office of Unemployment Insurance and our funding. And I know last week we did touch up on this with the Unemployment Insurance Task Force, but I think it's important again to go back and make sure that all members between both have had the opportunity to have this understanding. We use what's called the Resource Justification Model, or RJM. So to understand that it's basically a data collection system, and that it's unemployment insurance administrative expenditures. It's mostly completed within the fiscal year, the most recent fiscal year, so it works off the year before. State agencies operate their respective UI programs and then report this back up to their regional offices and to the federal government. The system works with the national office, as I said, in the federal government to make sure all the data is collected in order to appropriate funding in the next year as far as how it is done. I mentioned this before last week. It is very much piecework. For everything we do, we account for that work. So therefore, it provides us a funding stream back. Are you at the next slide? Thank you. So I just wanted to go back over on, again, in continuation of our federal funds. Our federal funds that come from the RJM are restrictive dollars and what they can be used for. So those can be used for OUI staff, information and technology expenses, and postage. Again, it does not, and we've mentioned this before, it doesn't cover everything that we are able to do. It's not enough to cover the expenses that we state on the slide, including to have their utilize their penalty and interest for funds to offset. This is where, again, we would ask for and have consideration for general dollars, which would free up to give us a little bit more flexibility because of the federal dollars restricting our funds. So UI funds cannot be used for claimant job training or back to work incentives. And my colleague, Mr. Pendergrass, will speak a little bit more about the workforce side in just a minute. If we go to the next slide here, again, we talked about this before. We also know in House Bill 413 that the legislative body was able to help us with this past year. This just kind of gives you the tax rate and where we set at this time. I think everybody kind of understands that our contributions are frozen at this point in time. We also work with our economists from the University of Kentucky's Gatton College of Business and Economics, who helps do the forecast for us. And this kind of helps us provide information back to the legislatures. And our work together with House Bill 413 was very much a good thing for our businesses in the area. And I think the Secretary, you might want to mention something about the trust fund.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, buddy. I did want to report that the Labor Cabinet and the Commonwealth have repaid the loan from the U.S. Department of Labor in the amount of $505 million. That payment was made on July 22nd, and by making that payment, it allows the Commonwealth to avoid any interest and any surcharges that may have begun at the beginning of September. And also it helped us avoid any increase in the employer's federal unemployment taxes paid in calendar year 2022. So that was a big development that we were able to pay off that loan. And that was a bipartisan effort, I would mention, between the administration and legislative leadership that we were able to do that.
Thank you, sir. Morgan, thank you, Morgan. So when we're looking at possibilities of things that we could do and work that we can maybe achieve together, one of those would be in the work incentive program, the short time compensation that you see on the slide in front of you. It's an alternative to layoffs for employers experiencing a reduction of staff. Currently, there are 27 states who participate in this program. Kentucky does not. The short-term compensation program preserves employees, jobs, and employers' trained workforce during the times of lowered economic activity. So this is something that we believe that maybe working together, we can come up as we build a stronger tomorrow. It's something we can work with legislatures on to gain more information for the legislatures, but also look at what is the work being done with those 27 other states and how effective it is for the employers and how effective it is for the citizens of each state that operates it right now. Also to mention to you all, I think we mentioned last week, and I'll just give you a brief update. I have in my notes that I want to go back through and just tell you, I did mention in the UI task force about our waivers. As you are aware, you helped us pass SB 7. We put that into play in the June, and those letters went out. Over 14,000 went out. Last week, I reported a little over 2,300 had been approved. I can report to you today that we have approved 4,366 waivers at this time, which totals to amount of a little over $5.6 million. That is a nice increase, almost double from the week before. In the waiver request, we have about 294 of those that are in appeals, just so that you understand that the claimant didn't answer something correctly. And we're trying to verify the intent of the claimant with that. But I think, again, that is some really good news from of the work that we have done together. We can go to the next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. This is Jamie again. I think everyone's aware of the Back to Work Incentive Program that Governor Beshear implemented. And just to briefly go over the technical points of that program, it will be a $1,500 bonus that is paid to the first 15,000 qualifying UI claimants who return to work between June 24th and July 30th. Obviously, that period concluded last week. The employee or the applicants must have a valid and active unemployment claim and have requested weekly payments as of June 23rd, 2021. right prior to the window for the back to work payments. They must be 18 years or older. They must not be job connected or does not have a job recall date from their previous job. They must be newly employed workers who work 120 hours in a consecutive 5-week period during that June 24th to July 30th window. The application process began on Monday, August 2nd, and it runs through October 1st of this year. And there is a website that will be utilized for those applicants and their employers to submit those applications for those $1,500 payments. And the application will lead the applicant through all of the required information to make sure that everything's in order before the payment is then processed. And Morgan, do we have a link to the website? There it is. At the bottom of the slide I won't read it off, you can see it there, but the website is now up and active. So the program's in implementation, and we look forward to seeing how many people apply for this program. And I would add too, if I could, the Labor Cabinet is working in conjunction with the Public Protection Cabinet. Public Protection will be the lead cabinet on administering this program with assistance from the Labor Cabinet from obviously the unemployment insurance perspective, as well as any manpower needs they might need to administer the program. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go to the next slide, and I think it is titled OUI Work Search, so that we make sure everybody's on the same. So when we're looking at this, remember that the pandemic unemployment assistance will come to an end Labor Day weekend, essentially September 4th. On the federal level, the act ends on the 6th currently. We know that over $34 million has been pumped into our economy from the citizens who needed it the most. So it will come to an end. And we started back on May 9th, putting back Work Search back in play for individuals to start getting that work assistance. So again, May 9th is a key date that when Work Search requirements came in back into unemployment, had been there before. This is nothing new. It just came back in after being off for a period during the pandemics. Now, to make sure that everybody is aware, every claimant gets what's called the Rights and Responsibility booklet, and it's on their summary account page in their system. But it can also be found on the kcc.ky.gov website. If you go on that home page, you will see the rights and responsibilities. That Rights and Responsibilities book is a great resource, not only for the claimants, but also maybe for you and your office, as someone may call in and see questions about their unemployment. It gives them the resource guide. I know that sometimes people forget it. I just wanted to remind everybody that it's there and it's a part of their summary page. But it also explains the Work Search and what are the requirements. So some of the claimants are exempt from Work Search, and those would include if they are part of a trade union and someone who finds work for you from a union, you are a student in a trained, approved program, you have a definite recall date within 12 weeks of your initial filing of your claim. 12 weeks. If it goes beyond that, then you are required to do Work Search. Are on a temporary leave of absence while still considered an employee, whose employer filed a mass electronic file on your behalf. Thank you. Next slide. So the remainder of claimants must fulfill the following. They are required to do a suitable Work Search. It's at least one job per contact week. They are to put that information in. Required to provide details during their biweekly benefit requests, including name of the business, the title, the position, and contact and date contacted. They are allowed a reasonable period of time to find work that is comparable in pay and skill level in order for their most recent employment. So again, I think that's important for people to understand. They have a reasonable amount of time to find something that's similar to what they had before. If they are not able to find that comparable work, then they must adjust their Work Search and find and accept another employment. Again, we're looking for something that can sustain them. It may not be back, and I'll use an example. Somebody was making $50,000 after a reasonable period of time, not able to find that $50,000 job, but they're able to find a $40,000 job. They would be expected to take that job. And again, that's what the last bullet says, which is a little bit less on the payment. If you're curious to know, and I noted this in my notes, that if you go to our KRS statutes in 341, 100 would explain to you what is suitable work. 341, 350 and beyond on that will explain to you how the benefits works for unemployment insurance, just to give you kind of another resource guide. Next slide. All right, and then one last thing I will say before I turn it over to my colleague, to Mr. Pendergrass, who helps us with the career centers every day. Just a reminder for folks since April 15th to lead in and give John a great lead in. They have seen over 40,000 in-person appointments, I believe, John, if not maybe a little bit more at this point. And our call center has taken over 70,000 calls since mid-April. So John, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you about the career centers. If I bumble through this, I apologize. This is the first time I've done this. So, but we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing that I wanted to mention is the local career centers are not unemployment offices. The career center, we've tried to do a good job about promoting all the other services, which unemployment insurance is a part of what we do, not its entirety. The Kentucky Career Centers are designed to provide a full range of job assistance for job seekers and linking those job seekers to employers and providing this assistance underneath one roof. Our centers are actually part of a larger network called the American Job Center System, which is coordinated by the USDOL's Employment and Training Administrations. So the Kentucky Career Centers, actually, they're a partnership between local workforce investment boards, local, state, and federal government, with the local workforce boards made up of, local leaders and employers leading the charge for those particular activities. And that's designed for a purpose. There's 10 different areas in our state, with 10 different workforce boards that coordinate the centers and the activities within their region. So everybody's shooting at the same target. And it's designed that way. The centers actually are designed to serve an individual holistically and as seamlessly as possible. If you look at this slide right here, you'll see different core partners that actually are housed in the centers or have access. Customers actually have access through the centers. And I'll go through this very, very briefly, not to bore you, but the WIOA, the WIOA, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, Title I, that deals with the training of individuals that might need to skill up a little bit. Of course, obviously, adult education under Skills U, Kentucky Skills U. Try to help people with, improving basic skills or completing secondary education. The Wagner-Pizer Act, that's actually administered by the Career Development Office. It its primary use is connecting and helping individuals with employment services, maybe resume writing, it may be interviewing skills, it may be just a whole myriad of different things. The Office of I'm getting tongue-tied, I'm sorry. The Office of Vocational Rehabilitation under the Rehabilitation Act helps people with barriers to employment. And all this is under one roof. And I can't stress that enough, that we strive to offer all these services, not just unemployment insurance. We want to, when we have an unemployment insurance customer in the building through an appointment or however they come in, we want to turn them into a job seeker, not just receiving unemployment benefits. And that's our main goal. The Kentucky Career Center actually has, we have two main customers, the job seekers and the employers. Obviously, without the employers, they're our number one customer, because without them providing the job, providing the assistance out there, people can go to work. So thank you. Next slide. Okay. One of the things that I definitely wanted to highlight, each career center has its own business service team. These business service teams, their primary job is to connect with employers, then connect those employers with whatever the needs may be. And I won't just go all the way through there, but it may be customized recruiting. It may be training their staff up. It may be the different state and federal programs that can help their business grow and help their staff grow. So just to give a few highlights of what we have been doing in the very recently, is trying to connect those job seekers with employers. Actually, one thing I do want to mention that we're quite proud of, and West Kentucky and the West Kentucky Board is really doing a good job with this, is today there's actually a large job fair in Paducah with 94 job employers. And the Career Development Office is actually setting up a mobile career center to help people with resumes and people that might not be prepared to speak with employers, to lessen some of those fears. So we're really proud of that. In Owensboro, I saw a few members on here. Last Saturday, or the 24th, actually, they had 36 employers there to put on. And every single week, if not daily, there's an employer at the Career Center, either inside or out, trying to recruit. So we are doing our best trying to engage employers, engage customers, to be able to connect them. That's all I got.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, we have concluded our presentation and are now happy to take any questions or comments from the members of the committee.
Yes, we'll take questions from members in the room first. We'll go with Senator Mills. Or is he not in the room? Go ahead, Senator. How about Representative Meredith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the presentation that you all have brought forward. I've got a comment and a couple of questions. First, I appreciate you all mentioning the situation of the federal loan being repaid, and I want to thank the General Assembly as a whole for the infinite wisdom of using those ARPA funds to repay that federal loan. I know there was an employer in my district that has between 45 and 50 employees, and that employer was looking, prior to us taking any action in this General Assembly, at a $26,000 increase to their unemployment bill annually. This was an employer that never laid a single person off during the pandemic, and even when capacity restrictions were in force and they had a third to a half of their employers working in the building and everybody else on call working from home, they were still paying everybody their full salary and benefits at that time. But they were still looking at a $26,000 increase just because of the overall situation with the Unemployment Trust Fund. And so I think that the General Assembly was wise to repay that loan, and hopefully that will provide significant relief to a lot of these small businesses who are being affected by those rate increases. Now going into my question, and this one's a two-part question. With regard to claims that the General Assembly members have been sending over to the UI office at this point to help with processing of unprocessed claims, what's the backlog timing, estimated time on those claims being processed at this point in time?
It depends, Representative Meredith. I mean, obviously, if Buddy Hoskinson has a claim and he has multiple issues, they would have to go through different layers of the UI system. We are still in months of backlog. There's no hiding that. We know that. We're working through those. We try to work the oldest to the newest. We have individuals, claims continue to be filed. And so that just builds on top of it. We are working through processes in order to alleviate that. And two of those ways, obviously, as my colleague, Mr. Pendergrass says, with the career centers being open, in-person appointments, as well as our call center to help go through those. Most people find themselves in what you call fact finding, and that's where we're still trying to get the information, whether it's a separation issue or a non-separation issue.
All right. And the second part of that question is more directed, I think, probably to John. What is the backlog? I guess backlog is not a proper terminology, but to get an in-person appointment right now, how long are people having to wait if they were to start today and try to get an in-person appointment?
The in-person appointments, actually, they open up daily, Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. They go rather fast. We very much advise people to be on that site right on time or just a few minutes before and refresh their page. And people are able to get appointments. I've actually tried to do this ourselves, but that's the way to get in. There's not really a backlog to speak of. It's just those appointments go very quickly.
And they're out for a 2-week window, right, John?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Thank you, buddy. When you make an appointment today, it will be for 2 weeks from now. That's in order to make sure we have the adequate staff and whatnot in the particular office that they're making an appointment in.
Representative Meredith, to follow that up too, we also have virtual appointments. Those virtual appointments are scheduled out to the right before Labor Day weekend at this point. And so a person, even if they have a virtual appointment, they can still seek an in-person appointment, and they can go anywhere in the state for those appointments if that's the availability that they choose to. So even if you have a virtual appointment, it doesn't keep you from trying to get a in-person appointment, sir.
One more question, if I might, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. My final follow-up just is regarding the $1,500 bonus for returning to work. I know I can't speak for the entire Commonwealth, obviously. I can speak for my region right now. I think Warren County and the surrounding counties, the counties that border Warren, have roughly 7,000 open jobs right now that are unfulfilled currently. I know there are several career fairs going on in the region currently to try to match folks with those jobs. And many of those openings are offering, if somebody is in good standing with their employment for 30 to 60 days and on time, doesn't miss a day, are offering some of the same kinds of bonuses at $500, $1,000, $1,500, or $2,000. Was there any consideration given to what the private sector is doing in that prior to the government stepping in and creating the $1,500 program?
Representative Meredith, this is Jamie Link. I'm not personally aware of I know that the governor and the administration spoke with several employers to work on the details of this program to try to find it's kind of the carrot rather than the stick, right? It's trying to incentivize people to get back to work and knowing that the $300 additional benefit ends in about a month now. So it was to incentivize those employees and working in conjunction with those employers to find the greatest incentive we could to get those people to get back to work. And we're waiting to see what the impact of this will be since the application period just opened up on Monday. But it was, as John mentioned earlier, it's a holistic approach to try to incentivize that unemployed population with the number of jobs that are available right now. And as we addressed the task force last week, we're having difficulties finding staffing for our career centers. So I think it's a national problem. It's certainly a statewide problem of trying to find and match employees to the available jobs that are out there.
One more just brief follow-up.
Quickly, please.
I will. Jamie, with regard to that $1,500 and how that money comes out, is that coming directly out of the trust fund, or is that a separate pot of money?
That is a separate pot of money, a total of $22.5 million. That will go to the first 15,000 valid applicants, as I mentioned. And we'll see exactly how many applications we have come October 1 when that period closes. But that is not trust fund money.
Representative Pratt.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate your presentation today. Got several questions, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, I noticed, and Michael, Representative Meredith touched on this, the $1,500 back to work. That started in June. And I would like to see the numbers. I know it just closed. Can you get back to this committee and tell us how many people actually applied for that? Because I'm going to guess it's going to be very little. Because again, I think these people are smart enough to realize that you get $1,500 to go back to work or $3,300 to not work. I would like to see those numbers. Can you get those back to the committee at the end of this closure, this period?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. We're tracking that on a daily basis, and we will be happy to report back to the committee and let you know. Again, as I mentioned, the window closes October 1, and once we collect that data, we'll certainly report that back to the committee.
How many's applied so far to date, just out of curiosity?
I think the latest numbers I saw this morning, if you'll give me just 1 second, I have it right here. As of close of business yesterday, there have been 289 applications that have been submitted or initiated, and they'll go through a review process.
I understand. All right. Other thing too, and you got the other day, we talked about the work search requirement on when someone's actually looking for a job. 2 questions on that. A, can you guys get back to employers? Because again, you've heard me say the other day, we get a lot of phone calls at my office saying, are you hiring? And if we say yes, we get a dial tone. Can you guys actually follow up with the people they list on as the reference they applied to make sure they actually applied there? Or could you just put down Roger Rabbit Incorporated and get by with that?
So, sir, this is Buddy Hoskins, and I'll take that. So, as we said last week, employers can also do the work refusal form that's on the kcc.ky.gov website under the employers. If someone they feel they've made an offer to, that then sets off a trigger for us to investigate. So that is the easiest route for us to do that. We do check our claims. There are checks and balances for eligibility, but those are better served if the employer also reports to help us.
Well, as I said last week, too, it's kind of hard to report someone with a dial tone. So I would encourage you guys to actually follow up with the employers they list that they applied to make sure they're actually applying there.
Representative Pratt, this is Morgan. Also, we should note that whenever they report the employer that they communicated with, they have to not only include the name of the employer, but the name of the person, the name and title of the person they communicated with at the employer, and the time and method of communication. So if they're not able to provide that information, it's likely that wouldn't constitute a valid work search.
The problem is you're putting all this work on the employer, not the person looking for unemployment. I would really like to see you guys reach out to the employer they list as hiring. Again, phone call, letter, email, whatever, and say, did this person actually apply there? And that would be very quickly get back in there. Another question real fast. And you all said in the work search, trade unions are exempt. Why trade unions? I mean, I know that they say you look for that, but that's something you don't offer to everyone else. I mean, why are they exempt?
Well, legislature, Representative Pratt puts that into statute. So, I mean, you all have the right to be able to look at that and evaluate that. And that may be something that the task force would want to do that you're serving on. So, but that is what's currently under statute. And so that is what we follow. And then with the other, I will just go back and say, we also, again, in the task force, we talked about the 90 positions that we're looking for. In order for us to do a lot of the things you're asking for, I need to have the staff in order to do that work.
I think
Representative Pratt, I think I can answer that a little better than that. Some of the trade unions there's an A and a B, and the trade unions are not out of work. They're out of work at this time, but they're not out of work. They're going back to work. So that's why they don't have to look for another job in a different career.
They've got a recall date. Okay, yes, sir.
Representative Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Labor Cabinet team that's presented here today. Very important information, and the work obviously is continuing on our unemployment situation, but I'm really encouraged to hear some of the Career Center information, and we did pass the bill this past session to provide more people for the work centers and the career centers. And I believe there are 15 currently open, and whoever wants to address this can. And my question gets to also the mobile units, and I understand this has to do with staffing, and whether or not those mobile units are ready. Is there a plan for where they will be, when they will be out? It's important, obviously, that we with just 15, and some of the original legislation had up to 55 different locations that we would have people available. So just talk a little bit about the mobile centers and when and how that's going to work.
Sure. They're currently, excuse me, 13 full service centers open. And talking about the mobile centers, those are primarily what we're trying to do in the job fairs, the different areas that individuals haven't been able to get into the Career Center, or they haven't come to the Career Center. And they have an opportunity to meet all these employers. Say like today, they have an opportunity to meet 94 different employers. And one thing I forgot to mention, and I'm glad that I have the opportunity to, in this particular job fair, one thing, and many others too, we're trying to identify is second chance employers. Employers that are giving individuals the opportunity with that maybe have a criminal record, a second chance. So we're trying to identify those employers so they can be sought out. So that's a very important part. But back to the mobile career centers, that's more or less trying to get out and about outside of the career center in a venue where customers are coming in and trying to meet that need there, if that makes sense. Now, due to current staffing levels, we're not able just to go everywhere, but we are trying to hit those opportunities where we see them that we can get the most bang for our buck, I guess.
Thank you.
If I can follow up real
quickly, please.
And it's about the career centers. The career centers are I have one in my district. They had an open house, which I highly recommend. If you have a career center near you, you get to go in and really see the holistic work that Mr. Pendergrass has been talking about, not only just for unemployment insurance, but it's encouraging. We have a veterans officer in the Covington location, and what they do to connect vets to jobs. I just encourage you to visit your career center. You'll feel a little better than after you get those unemployment calls. Thank you.
Yes, that's what we've been preaching. We want these centers to for people to get employed and not just work on getting unemployment insurance. Representative Graham. Can you turn your mic on?
And I'll take off my mask as well. I just want to go back to a couple of things that were said at the very beginning when the presentation was made, and you talked about this STC program being established, but that we're not part of this this system. What states, or just give me a few, have participated, and how successful has this operation bent for those in those states that have done that?
Sure. So that's one of the things that I mentioned, and I'm happy to follow up with you all to give you that information. We work with our national organization, NASWAL, so I can go back through and give you exactly what states, when they implemented it, and how they find that to be a benefit to not only the citizens they serve, but the employers. I can gather that information. I don't have it with me today, but I'll happily get it for you.
Well, I'd certainly appreciate if you could provide that to the committee members.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, may I also follow up? Is there any kind of data that breaks down according to the level of difficulty in resolving claims for those who are unemployed? Is there a tracking system or data system that shows that sometimes you have major issues in trying to resolve a claim, and then there's others in which they've loaded up the information and then they've asked to load up the information again, and then sometimes they have to do it a third time? And is there any way in which, I mean, they've been receiving their benefits, but then something comes up and says it's under investigation or we need to go back and look? But is there a data breakdown in terms of what's a difficult claim to resolve and what is a issue of a matter of just going back in and looking at the information and then resolving that issue? Does the data do that for you all, or is the system too old to do that?
Well, it is an older system, so that we all know and agree upon. And so most of the findings or the issues that arise from a claimant, you could be okay 1 week, and then when you go back to resubmit, you've answered something different, and therefore it's kicking it back out. We do know in this time frame how much we've had with fraud, and we've talked about it to the group. We know the identity verification has been a huge issue across the country. We didn't speak about it this morning, but one of the products we put in place is a product called ID.me. ID.me is now used by 25, 26 states, IRS, federal veterans level, and that is helping us tremendously. As I'm looking at a report from ID.me since in the basically 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks that we've had ID.me, we've pushed 180,000 ID verification issues through that. And through that, 24,000 individuals has gone in to do their verification. It tells me a couple of things when we're talking about data. How many of those are fraudulent up front that would not ever touch it? They were just hoping something would stick like spaghetti to a wall. I'm able to know immediately out of that 24,000 that has gone in, that 2,100, a little over 2,100 are fraudulent. Almost 1,200 are suspected to be fraudulent. Those are the things that we look at to see where they are bottlenecking us in backlogs. And the ID verification, to the point, is probably the largest one. Then we get into what's considered a separation issue to a non-SEP issue. We had an employer yesterday, as an example, without mentioning the employer, who filled out the separation information wrong, and it kept 13 members actually from getting their unemployment. So we are constantly going back and looking at those, but so much of it, sir, has to have a hands-on touch in order to correct.
I think Representative Graham wanted to know if you classify this as a hard one to deal with or this is an easy one, and I think you touch on that at the end. Is if you go in and look at it, you can tell that, but you don't actually have a classification of this one's easy.
No, we don't have a classification of them.
Okay.
We can, the U.S. system in general is complex.
Thank you.
Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman Nemus, and I too will take off my mask. I really have more of a comment directed to Secretary Link. Secretary Link, this is Senator Thomas, and I want to tell you how glad I am that you are in the position you are, Secretary of Labor Cabinet. I've worked with you in the past, in various levels of government, and I think Governor Beshear made an excellent choice in selecting you. So I'm glad you're back in a very high level with the administration. I also want to thank you. I also want to thank you for your assistance with dealing with unemployment insurance. Your predecessor was very helpful to me. Over the last year and a half, as I've said many times at committees like this, I've heard people complain about unemployment insurance. I've never experienced that. I know personally I've assisted scores of individuals with getting their unemployment. And just yesterday, I want to tell you, working with you, I had another gentleman of mine, a constituent, who got his pay forms and called me and thanked me profusely for helping me get his unemployment. And I want to thank you for that, and just continue to be a good job. Again, I know the Labor Cabinet's in good hands with you. Again, I wish Secretary Roberts well. He was a good man, but I'm glad to see where you are in your position, and thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that I'm a very small part of a team, and Executive Director Hoskinson and his team were of great help with all the claims or all the constituent calls we get from all the legislative members. And it takes everyone to address the volume of issues that we're facing. And we appreciate the assistance that the General Assembly gives us and in passing those along to us. And as Buddy mentioned, we work on those as quickly as we possibly can. I think I mentioned in the task force last week that the UI staff and several other people that have been brought to bear to address this issue are working 6 days a week, 12 plus hours a day nonstop, and have been for the last 16 or 17 months. So it's nice to hear that, and we appreciate it. We know there's a lot more to do. And again, I can only
thank you, Representative Donahue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is directed to the panel itself. We know that there have some difficulties getting staff at the career centers, and in simplistic terms, could you explain to us why? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Donahue. I think it's multifaceted, but one of the reasons I think we're having difficulty, like many employers across the state, is our positions the positions that we're hiring right now are funded with federal funds, so they're time limited, and of course, any employee has the situation that tomorrow they may not have a job, but trying to recruit for these jobs, it's a difficult job. It's a very intense job. And using those federal funds, those are not guaranteed. And when those federal funds run out, that job will come to an end. So certainly employees are likely looking for longer term opportunities. But we continue, I think in Louisville, I mentioned to the task force last week, we had issued vacancy announcements 3 different times to hire staffing at the Louisville Career Development Center. And we're finding that elsewhere across the state. So we're looking at opportunities anywhere we can to find staffing because we know the demand for services is there. And, I don't know if John or Buddy, if you have anything you'd want to add regarding the difficulties we're having.
I will say for the UI side, it's the same. And if you actually go to our kcc.ky.gov website, at the very top, we even have, we're hiring, unemployment insurance is hiring. Click right there and send people to us, as it's hard for us to get staff to do a lot of that work. We too, like the other industries, are trying to figure out what are the out of the box things that we can do to maybe attract folks.
Thank you. Representative Miles.
Thank you, Chairman. I apologize. It takes us a little while to click on everything. I tell you, I mean, we've had lots of conversations this morning and a lot of comments, and it's just amazing to me, just to put it in perspective, what I tried this morning. And this is something I have been trying ever since the in-person appointments went up. So since April 15th, I think was whenever the offices actually opened in person, I've been able to set up one person with an appointment. And that's been me trying to log on. This morning, I got on at 7:55 because it's 9 o'clock Eastern time on the way that it's set up. 7:55, I got on and it said no appointments available. At 8:07, There were in-person appointments available in Hazard, Moorhead, and Prestonburg. By 8:08, there were no appointments available. So I guess my question is, whenever Morgan Eves testified July 27th, there were these virtual meetings. Supposedly we have in-person meetings, call centers. My concern is, I'm point blank asking the question right here, right now. What solutions do you have to offer us, to offer our constituents? Our LAs have been cut off from any type of ability to help these people. I'm very happy that Senator Thomas has not experienced what a lot of us have experienced. I'm glad that you've been able to help him, and I appreciate that. It is no disrespect. Our Career Center and our unemployment office locally has done a phenomenal job, and they have done the very best they can. So my question is, what are all of our options? I hear all of these, all of the above, but I have been not successful in any of the above. So my question is, what all of the above solutions do you have for us to offer? Additionally, why were the 100 LRC staffers, and I know we keep hearing because of security, but yet you're hiring, but yet we have people that are currently begging to help you all, to help our constituents, because they're the front lines. They're the ones getting the phone calls. We're getting the phone calls of the people that are desperate right now. And my final comment to that, it is very frustrating that we are offering an incentive for people to go back to work after we have so many constituents that have worked the entire time during this pandemic. And I know hospitals especially, the staffing is unbelievable. They are just extremely exhausted and are struggling. And now we're offering incentives for people to take jobs elsewhere, more or less. So when do we have a solution for all of the above? That is my question.
Thank you, Representative Miles. I'll try to address that as best I can. Obviously, the offer for the LRC staff to come and assist with this, I think that was made when unemployment insurance was not in the labor cabinet, and I'm not disparaging anyone, but it takes about 6 months to train an unemployment insurance staff member to perform their duties. And I can only speculate that LRC staff members have the expectation that they would come help with unemployment insurance, and then they would return to their regular jobs. Certainly, as the General Assembly session approached, and as you prepared for that. So taking employees and taking 6 months to train them, and then them having to go back to their regular job shortly thereafter would not have been the best situation. Also, there would have had to been federal background checks that would have been quite expensive for us to do for that short time staffer. That's why we're looking for long-term employees to come to work, so that we can train them, we can do the background checks, and then we have a long-term employee that's ready and able to do that work. And then we're looking at some federal guidance that, in our interpretation, it prohibits us from using flexible staffing after the first week of September of this year. So those types of things didn't make that an ideal situation for us, certainly. And again, we're trying to do everything we can to staff up in the areas that we need it most. We're also looking at any technological enhancements that we can make for virtual appointments, increase staffing for call centers to increase the number of claimants that we can work with and resolve their issues. So you're right, it's all of the above. It's in person, it's virtual, anything we can do to help address these backlogs. And I think what you pointed out with the trying to get the employment is a supply and demand issue. The supply or the demand, far outweighs the supply of resources that we currently have to address that demand. And we're trying to work through that as quickly as we possibly can. And I would also ask Buddy and John, since they're more directly involved with it, if they have anything they could add to address your question.
Thank you. I think Representative Miles was a little frustrated, as most of us. The LRC was not allowed to package claims, and it was said because they had to have federal approval, which we didn't ask for. And then we went out and hired an agency to do the exact same thing at millions of dollars. And then after a while, then we got their federal approval, and then we abolished them. So that's the frustration that Representative Miles is talking about. And Representative Miles, is there anything else you want them to answer before I go to our time constraint, our last question?
My main question, the way that I tried this morning to log on and get an appointment, either virtual, in person, or have some type of call center, where do we send our constituents for that? Because it has not worked for me. It has worked once for me since April 15th. So tell me, how do I do it differently than log on the website, try to get an in-person appointment? Tell me what I need to do different.
Representative Miles, this is Morgan. I'm happy, as you know, I've been continuing to help legislators with UI issues. I'm happy to receive any of those communications from you or your constituents.
I do want to you did help me with one constituent that was not a pandemic issue, that was nothing to do with the pandemic. I apologize. I neglected to point out that one that you helped me with on that. So I want to thank you.
No problem. And I'm happy to continue to receive those communications. If anyone's having any difficulties, you're happy to send those over to me.
Thank you. Last question, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, could you give us a status report on the RFP on rewriting the unemployment system? When was it issued? What are the deadlines? What's the status, et cetera? And the second part of the question is, did your specifications allow an off-the-shelf solution from a national vendor, or were they written in such a way as to require a totally customized solution? Thank you.
Morning, Representative Miller. It's good to see you again. The RFP that was developed, and I think we all know took several months to work through that process. To my knowledge, there were explorations into off-the-shelf systems that were out there. I think one of the issues, as I understand it, is a lot of states were in the process or had just quote unquote modernized their unemployment insurance systems pre-pandemic. And then when the pandemic struck, their systems failed as well. So I think all states are looking at how do we, as I mentioned to the task force last week, how do we build the church for Easter Sunday? Because we are going to have to be prepared in the future to address a situation like this again. Regarding the current redrafting of the RFP, I can tell you that we are working as quickly as possible to have that back out on the street. My hope would be within the next couple of weeks that we would have that RFP on the street, certainly by the end of August. And then given the prior RFP process, and the vendor community is aware of our reissuance of an RFP, that we will compress the response timeframe as well as the evaluation timeframe to try to get to an award as quickly as we can. I also mentioned to the task force last week that we are also exploring a new system development with the U.S. Department of Labor. They are forming a 5 to 6 state consortium to do exactly that, to develop a new unemployment insurance system for both the federal requirements and then tailoring it to specific state requirements. So we're going to explore both of those avenues to see which one would best suit the Commonwealth and best meet the needs of our citizens. The original time frame, I believe, was 2 to 3 years for the total system replacement, and I see no reason to change from that time frame. We'll just have to manage it and make sure that happens.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Morgan, I'd sent you some questions. Can you go through them the answers quickly or with me after this meeting?
Yes, I believe we answered the majority of them, but I'll go back through and get with you after the meeting to make sure each one has been answered.
Thank you. And I just want to make a comment. Thanks to Labor Cabinet for repeatedly coming back for this very important issue. And Secretary Link, hopefully you are learning as you are teaching us what goes on at the unemployment office this time.
It's I've made the comment, Mr. Chairman, that I'm not drinking from a fire hose. I'm drinking from the water main. But we all are, and we recognize the vital importance of this issue. And we are working as much as humanly possible to resolve it as quickly as possible, to get the claims paid, the valid claims paid. And certainly we stand by. If you have any questions or need assistance, please let us know.
Thank you. Next, we have...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This is Representative Dossett.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Would you mind? I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask, please.
Quickly, please.
Very quickly. To begin with, I want to say thank you to Morgan Eves. Morgan, you've been have helped me numerous times with individuals that I've had problems with claims, and I do want to just say thank you for your help. It's been greatly appreciated. Starting with the applications, the job openings there with the Office of Unemployment, how many applicants have actually applied for those positions?
Representative Dawson, this is Jamie Link. I'm not exactly sure of that number. We can look into that. I'll check with our Human Resources Department, and we'll check into that and get back with you as quickly as possible.
I greatly appreciate that. I know what has been mentioned earlier, numerous times I've had other business owners like myself and individuals within industry, HRs there within industries, and they have told me that the labor market has dried up since January, and they are getting no applicants, or the applicants that do apply do not show up for interviews. And I would like to have an idea how many people are actually applying for those jobs that have actually submitted applications. So I would appreciate that.
Certainly, and I can tell you that we have experienced the same, where we have scheduled interviews for employees or candidates to come in and interview for positions, and there are several no-shows. They just don't show up for their appointments.
Okay, and one more question. Fraudulent claims. Do we have an idea of how many fraudulent claims have been filed here within the state itself, within Kentucky itself, since the beginning of the pandemic?
Yes, sir. We do know that. We watch that per week. What we have seen is that the majority of all fraudulent claims come through the pandemic assistance. We can get you a direct number, but it's been several hundred thousands of claims that have come through. And as I testified earlier in the year, it's about $63 billion of an issue nationwide. And by the time this is done, the country will probably have about $105 billion tied up in fraudulent claims.
Well, I would like to know that number that have been filed and how much has actually been paid out to those fraudulent claims. I know 3 weeks ago, I received a fraudulent claim within my name. And of course, I turned the information over, but that concerned me, especially when you see it personally. I've had other individuals that have reached out to me over the last 6-8 months that have had fraudulent claims filed in their names. And it concerns you how they're getting the information and actually it's getting out there. And it also concerned me that the application came through to me showing how many dollars I would receive. And if I had not have looked at that in the mail, would that payment have gone on? How would that have worked in that situation? If I had not have caught that letter, would that payment have gone out?
No, not necessarily. So what happens with that? That's just a letter of potential eligibility that comes through. And again, you're right, sir, that when someone finds out that they're fraud, we have the fraud link on the website, and there are 3 types of fraud: employer, identity theft, and claimant fraud. So majority of those, about 95% of those, are stopped with an internal stop that we have because they don't meet all the requirements. The imposter is just trying to pick up information that they've received from the dark web. in order to see if they can get that to stick. And I understand the personal, as my wife, who's a school teacher, had one filed on her as well.
Well, and once again, I want to thank you for the presentation, and any assistance that we can be there, please reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So, Secretary Link, what you're saying is people have job searched you, and did they turn you in as a possible employer? You don't have to answer that. I'm just making that statement. Okay, next up we have Lakeisha Miller and Charles All from Kentucky Chamber. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glad to be able to be here in person. My colleague, Lakeisha Miller, she is joining us virtually, and I think I can see her there. My name is Charles All, Senior Policy Analyst at the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. I'll let Lakeisha introduce herself here in just a minute, and she'll be the focus of most of our remarks here today. I do want to start by just echoing what Representative Meredith said in regards to the General Assembly's decision to pay down that UI trust fund debt. That was, as he said, a very critical move by the General Assembly that I want to emphasize helped keep dollars, jobs, investment in your local communities. And so that's something that the Chamber and the business community greatly appreciates. And it was a very smart move on the General Assembly's part. We appreciate the opportunity, though, to be here to talk about the training needs of employers and the workforce and how these needs are evolving throughout the course of the pandemic and the economic recovery. I'm not going to dive too deep into the labor force shortage issues because I think we've talked about those in significant detail already today, but I do want to let legislators know that the Chamber will soon be releasing a large-scale report taking a historical and comparative approach to the current labor force shortage, getting into some of the root causes of that shortage, and also recommending some solutions. So that is something I want you all just to be aware of and keep an eye out for. And it's certainly something we'll be talking about in a lot of detail. Instead, what I want to do here is kind of frame some of this conversation in terms of how employers are responding to labor force shortages. So how exactly are employers responding to this? I think you're seeing it happen in a few different ways. We are seeing wage increases. We are seeing benefit packages enhanced. We're seeing employers offering more flexibility and time off, which is a really important thing to emphasize because if you take a look at survey data, that is something that unemployed individuals as well as workers who are looking for work, they emphasize that very heavily, the importance of remote work options, hybrid options, things like that. And that's something I think you're seeing a lot of employers try to figure out ways to offer. You're also seeing employers scale back services, scale back the goods that they're offering, changing or reducing operating hours and altering business models in order to accommodate the fact that they have less staff and it's harder to find staff. Other things we're seeing is employers are figuring out ways to increase or maintain productivity with smaller workforces, so simply doing more with less. And we also know from survey data that employers are increasing investment in automative technologies that will permanently replace certain job functions as a way of dealing with labor force shortages. Another thing, though, that we are seeing is employers adjusting some of the requirements for open positions in terms of training, education, skills, and experience requirements. So certain things that they may have required previously, they've taking a look at reducing some of those. And instead of expecting those employees to come in with those skills, we're seeing an increase in in-house training and on-the-job learning. Ultimately, what this is getting at is a skills gap. That's something that's not new. That's something that folks in the General Assembly have looked at for a long time, as well as at the Chamber. We've been talking about skills gaps for a while. It's not new, and it's something that employers have been working to address for several years now. But as with many things, with the pandemic, the economic conditions of the recovery in the pandemic have made these things a little bit more difficult. I do want to emphasize that in-house training and on-the-job learning are good things, both for employers and employees. But it is important to understand that there are financial and economic trade-offs when we rely very heavily on in-house training and on-the-job learning. These things are expensive oftentimes. They can be time-consuming, especially for new employees and when we're dealing with significant skills gaps. In addition, when it comes to new employees without requisite experience and skills, their on-ramp to full productivity can often be a lot longer than an employee with requisite experience and skills. And these dynamics can affect overall state and national productivity levels, GDP growth, and at a more basic level, consumer satisfaction. With all that in mind, I think closing skills gaps and ensuring workers have skills and experiences that employers need should be an important policy goal for Kentucky. So one way that we can accomplish that goal is through fostering intentional partnerships between the business community and education and workforce development systems. And that's one of the things we wanted to talk with you all about, and to talk about how the Chamber has been pursuing this work and share some insights about what we are learning about the training needs of workers and employers and skills gaps. I now want to turn things over to my colleague, Lakeisha Miller.
Yes, thank you, Charles. And again, my name is Lakeisha Miller, Executive Director of the Kentucky Chamber Workforce Center. Again, really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to speak more closely about the training needs employers have and how we can create a better alignment between education and the needs of Kentucky employers. So Charles spent his remarks really looking at workforce trends nationally. I'd like to focus a little bit more on what we've observed in Kentucky. So only 56.3% of Kentucky adults are in the workforce. So this includes employed individuals and unemployed individuals actively looking for work. So as a result, this means that 44% of Kentuckians are not participating in our current workforce. So many working age adults just simply don't have the necessary skills that our employers need. And we've talked about that already today. And as Charles mentioned, this skills misalignment isn't new. In fact, back in 2017, Kentucky SHRM did a study with employers and found that 81% of those employers were projecting a moderate to high growth for their organizations. And those employers were still saying 84% of them were actually stating that they still couldn't find qualified workers. So as a result of the pandemic, this skill gap just continues to widen. So it really is imperative that we get Kentuckians skilled up in the ways that employers need. So the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce Foundation, in partnership with our Education and Workforce Cabinet, we launched a workforce program called Talent Pipeline Management, or I'll refer to it as TPM, just to shorten it up. But that program is focused on addressing the skills gap in an employer-driven way. So TPM is an effort to mobilize the business community to close the skills gap. But what we do is we apply lessons from the supply chain management process. So essentially moving the employers as the end customer, putting them into the driver's seat of managing their talent pipelines. So we go through a pretty strategic process. Employers start to become more effective and efficient at determining their most critical workforce needs through data and evaluating the skills that they need for those critical positions with their businesses. And most importantly, we start to facilitate a process to communicate these needs and manage and improve their talent pipelines. So what we will say is since 2018, TPM Kentucky has launched 25 employer collaboratives focused on building meaningful career pathways in the state. So, and again, these employer collaboratives are employers in similar industries or similar critical pain points that are working together to increase their talent pipeline or increase the quality of the talent that enters their pipeline. So TPM is very, very critical because it can help pre-existing workforce development and education programs really hone in on what employers need. More than 200 employers across Kentucky in various sectors like manufacturing, construction, distilling, equine, of course, healthcare, are using TPM to develop meaningful pipelines across the state. And this alignment has actually resulted in 2,000 Kentuckians being connected to jobs and training opportunities. So overall, business engagement is critical to the success of our workforce. And the Kentucky Chamber Foundation's Bus to Business program has engaged over 110 businesses, 210 schools across Kentucky, reaching over 42,000 students. And again, this program is all about helping students learn about what careers are in demand, and then hoping to gauge their interest in moving them into those careers after high school. So when we have fewer workers, we need to make the most of the workforce that we have. So for individuals that struggled with substance use disorder or have previously been incarcerated, but they've committed to turning their lives around, second chances can really make all the difference. And I know John talked about that earlier today. So in partnership with the Office of Drug Control Policy, the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, and Kentucky Opioid Response Effort, the Chamber Foundation's Workforce Recovery Program has recruited over 18,500 fair chance jobs across the state, which is phenomenal. And research, has just shown that hiring people with records or in recovery are simply smart business. Retention rates are higher, turnover is lower, and these employees tend to be most loyal. So second chance hiring is definitely something we've encouraged at the Chamber. So the fact still remains that, our workers are the most valuable asset that we have. And Charles alluded to this. What we've seen through talent pipeline management and working with employers, they're reevaluating those requirements for the workforce. So, we've seen hospitality, healthcare, transportation sectors continue to struggle to find workers, even despite raising wages. But conversely, we've also seen other sectors like energy, logistics, technology surge as a result of COVID. And employers are really taking a close look at their education and experience requirements in hopes of increasing those talent pools. And as Charles mentioned with automation, we know that low-skilled jobs are most vulnerable to automation, and the need for higher skilled jobs will continue to grow in demand. So, employers are still continuing to bear the load of training and upskilling their employees. So investing in programs like talent pipeline management can only help to identify those training opportunities more efficiently, and again, put us on the path to closing that skills gap. So that's my remarks for today. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. We'll take questions from members in the room. First is Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman Nemus. Lakeisha and Charles, I just pointed out to my colleague, Representative Graham, that your comment that today our workforce is 56.4% is a 5% reduction just in the last 19 months, because both of you know that in January 1st, 2020, our workforce participation rate was 61.3%. So we've lost 5% in the last 19 months. That is scary. That's scary to see that kind of reduction. Now, I listened to both of you talk, and you emphasized automation as one of the causes for this reduction. And I don't disagree with you. But I'm going to point out three things that I think would overcome that cause. Okay. Number one, I've been a strong advocate since I got here for an increase in minimum wage. Okay. Present minimum wage here in Kentucky and in the nation is $7.25. Now, there's no one on this dais today that's earning $7.25 an hour. Okay. And because of that, I don't see why we expect everybody else to go to work and earn $7.25. I think that's one of the major causes for why people aren't returning to work today, because they're being paid impoverished wages. So I think that's one thing that we ought to change. Number two, we have a practice in this country and in the state of refusing to allow ex-felons to work. Somehow a felony is a barrier to work. Why? I don't understand. Because we say in theory that once you've paid your time, earth all things are forgiven. But that's not the reality. Okay. I think we need to stop that practice and allow people who have served their time want to come back and be contributing citizens to our society to be allowed to do so. Number two. Number three, and I mentioned this yesterday at the Education
Excuse
Committee
me.
meeting.
If you are remote, will you please mute your, please?
Number three, to address this workforce participation problem, because it is a problem, Lakeisha and Charles. Okay, I think we ought to fund schools from pre-K to 14. Okay, I've been an advocate of that for many years. I mentioned that again yesterday in Education Committee. Okay, we are putting an artificial ceiling on a lot of our young people by not giving them the quality of education and the time in school that they need. We don't need to stop funding school at 12. We can go all the way to 14 years and create pathways in our education system that other states are doing quite successfully so that we can have the kind of workforce that we need in the state. Now, I want the both of you to comment on that. Lakeisha, I will start with you since you're the executive director. What do you think about those three changes that I propose? Increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Number two, get rid of the felony barrier. And number three, funding school from pre-K to 14.
Yeah, I appreciate the questions, and I'll definitely address those questions. So first, let me start with the stigma that you talked about around second chance hiring. I couldn't agree more. And I think the work that we're doing through our workforce recovery program is helping to start identify and educate and recruit those employers that have raised their hand and said, hey, I am a second chance employer. Because we want people to reduce that stigma. I couldn't agree more in terms of saying, hey, if you've served your time, we need to get you back into the workplace, right? And we do know employment isn't the only barrier that whether it's people in recovery or previously incarcerated individuals face. We know there's transportation, we know there's housing, we know there's food, but employment is also a barrier that they face. And if we can solve employment, that tends to take care of a lot of the other barriers. So I couldn't agree more there. We have seen employers increase wages during this time. And, quite frankly, in some instances that has increased their pipeline of people and applications, but in some areas that hasn't, right? So, we can't necessarily look at it as a one issue thing. I mean, there's the raising costs of childcare. There is that education misalignment that existed pre-COVID. It still exists today. We simply have to get our Kentuckians upskilled, right, to meet those needs of our future economy. So I think, employers are rising to the occasion of increasing wages, but we also can't eliminate the other barriers that exist. And in terms of, just funding schools, schools are starting to see a big influx around the funding that they're receiving now from ARPA. And, with programs like Bus to Business and helping kids become more exposed to those in-demand careers or maybe careers that they have never heard of, I think that just increases our chances of getting those students ready for the workforce needs. Charles, I don't know if you had anything else to add.
Yeah, I had a couple quick things. First, Senator Thomas, I want to go back to what you mentioned about the labor force participation rate, because that's something at the chamber, we talk about this all day. Lakeisha and I talk about this all day. You're absolutely right that the collapse in the labor market that took place throughout the course of the pandemic was absolutely terrifying. It's a scary thing to look at on a chart. What I do want to emphasize to all legislators and policymakers throughout Kentucky, though, is I think far more troubling is this insidious trend that took place going back from 2000 all the way to the present day of a steady decline in our labor force participation rate. Back in the year January of 2000, we had a labor force participation rate of about 63%. That has steadily declined over time, and that is a very troubling trend line that we all need to spend a lot of time thinking about. As Lakeisha mentioned, we're right there with you on removing barriers to work for individuals with criminal records. The chamber is fully invested in that, and we 100% agree. We also agree on the importance of education funding. I think when it comes to things like minimum wage increases, that's where I think we need to be a little more careful and ask ourselves, when it comes to any sort of wage increase, what's optimal? Because an inoptimal wage increase has a lot of negative trade-offs. We mentioned automation, for example. an inoptimal wage increase will likely accelerate automation. Similarly, an inoptimal wage increase could also reduce in a reduction in overall jobs availability. That's one of the reasons why we think upskilling is a much stronger alternative than just a blanket wage increase, depending on what that wage increase is. But upskilling simply just has less downside, and it allows individuals to go into those high wage opportunities. So it's really just it's all upside with upskilling. It's one way to put that. And Ed, I would also echo what Lakeisha was saying too with wages. We've seen wage increases across the board. Logistics sectors, healthcare sectors, all of those are raising wages significantly. They're still having significant trouble hiring, which is another reason why when we try to identify the root causes of labor force shortages, I think we need to look deeper than things just like wages, for example. Now, in terms of those root causes, I think you really hit the nail on the head, though, when you get into things like barriers for individuals with criminal records, because we have a lot of people in Kentucky with criminal records. And so I do think that's a major root cause that we need to get more intense about dealing with, and making sure that when individuals leave incarceration, that they find employment. That's, I think, a good thing for all Kentuckians to be focused on.
Thank you. Representative Donahue, you have the last.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to make a comment here as I listen to this and what the senator said earlier. None of us in this room make less than minimum wage or have been in those type of environments or jobs. The thing I'd like to say is this: that the pandemic was a perfect storm. All the issues we had as far as employment, education, childcare, all those stuff were teetering for years because we didn't do what needed to be done to bring them up to where they needed to be for us to be a successful society. So industry right now, and I'm a fan of industry myself as well too, but they're kicking and screaming and they're bringing wages up because they have to. But we need to make a legitimate effort to what we're going to do to solve our social issues. For example, I've had a bill filed for years. It's called providing a living weekly wage, depending on what county you're in, to bring those people up to give them more than that. You know, the problem we're having right here is none of us in this room, we're discussing the livelihood of folks that we're not on the same playing field as those folks are on. We need to bring everybody up to the same playing field. And when you do that, the industry will increase and you do those things. If I may say this, I had a friend of mine went to Russia for a year. He worked for the International Harvester, which is not with us anymore. And they were there and he talked about automation, and he walked into a factory, you know, because they had a foundry in Louisville, and they walked and he went there. People working. He said, we could automate all this stuff out of here. And he says, well, what are we going to do with the people? How are they going to make a living? How are they going to be successful? So automation is not always the key to what we need to do. I appreciate you, President. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. And I think Senator Thomas came up with a lot of good points, is that we need to educate and train our people for what is needed. And I think my good friend Aaron Thompson is doing a great job over there of trying to look and tell students what they need to learn for a career instead of just learning underwater basket weaving. So we appreciate it. And if there are no more questions,
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. This is Representative Dawson again.
You always want the last word, don't you, Myron? Okay, go ahead. Last question.
No, I apologize. I can't get through to let you know I do have a question. In case I'm asking something that was repeating a question, I had to pull off the meeting just a moment ago. As a small business owner, there seems like there's always an emergency coming up, and I did have to pull off and make a phone call. I did want to ask a question concerning the federal pandemic unemployment assistance. What's the chamber's view? If that ends in September, is it felt that will help increase the labor pool?
In short, yes, we think that could be. We ultimately, when those benefits end, yes, I do think the chamber as a whole thinks, yes, that will ultimately help. Now, is it going to help on the scale to where we're going to see that in large macroeconomic data? That I think is really hard to tell. There's a whole lot of other factors that are going to be playing into this at the same time. So I think in terms of us measuring the actual impact of that program, I think it's important that everyone be very realistic about how that is going to play out. But the chamber has supported an early withdrawal from that program. And ultimately now that's obviously going to happen on September 6th. But we do anticipate that will have some level of positive effect on the overall labor market.
Thank you.
I do have a question real quick, please. I'm so sorry.
Okay, last question, quickly.
Okay, and I do, as looking at inflation, and as we are seeing businesses increase pay scale, looking at adding benefits. I know I had a conversation with a daycare owner last week that was actually increasing benefits, trying to entice individuals to want to apply for those positions. And then conversations I have had with other businesses having problems getting shipments in, whether they be coming from overseas. I know there were some issues coming up at the Port of Los Angeles with the lack of employees being able to unload cargo and freight. Are we looking at how this inflation is going to impact us as a whole when we see these employees, these individuals, unless we get them enticed to go back to work? That's my last question.
So if I want to make sure I understand the question, Representative, is your question just how we're monitoring inflation, or are you asking more about the intersection of wages and inflation?
Wages, inflation, and the lack of a labor labor pool there, because if individuals, as I said, if they do extend these pandemic unemployment benefits and it doesn't encourage people to get back into the workforce, what are we creating for our future there with inflation? As you mentioned, seeing businesses looking at
Charles, we are past time. So.
Yeah, Representative, I'll try to circle back with you on this. Very, very short answer is ultimately yes. There is a direct relationship between the labor force shortage, I think rapid wage increase, and those things are contributing to inflation. I think we can feel safely assured in saying that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize.
Oh, thank you. It still befuddles me that we're saying that we can't get people in the workforce because we're paying them too much unemployment insurance, but yet we can't get the unemployment insurance to the people. We can't pay them. So it's contradictory there. Our next meeting will be held Wednesday, September the 8th at 9 a.m. Meeting is adjourned.